And then we are going to also wrap up this series that we've been in now for quite a few weeks called Love Your Neighbor. And this one has been fun, really kind of looking at what does it mean to be a person of love? How do we do it? How do we, in 2023, here in this part of kind of Northeast Ohio, how do we live in love and do so in a way that's really honoring to Jesus? And we said that really we want to make sure as we jump into these conversations, we have kind of set this foundation every week that we want to make sure we understand the why behind our love. It's not just that we're trying to be good people and kind of doing some good stuff or making ourselves feel better. We want it to come from a much deeper place. And the reality is that's exactly what the Bible lays out for us. We started with this verse every week. Now we said we love because he first loved us, right? And so we look at the reality of Christ's love for us, right? The fact that he would come to the planet and he would live a perfect life and die an innocent death and rise from the dead and offer us life, that the Father would choose to send his Son to do that for us. And we would say that love does not make any sense. Why would someone be willing to do that for us, even when we have failed and even rebelled against God, that he would kind of move towards us? And so we said, that's a motivator. And I want to love the way that I've been loved. And we said the ways that, at least some of the ways that can show up, we've talked about over the last bunch of weeks now. And if you've missed those conversations, you can catch up online. But we've been talking about often love looks like listening. It looks like initiating relationship, moving towards people. It looks like meeting needs sometimes as they kind of pop up and arise. And then last week, we talked a lot about what it looks like to love in the everyday. Right, in the everyday, like the everyday kind of grind, normal life. How do we love each other, love our neighbors in the way that we approach every day? If we go to work, how do I go to work every day with love on my mind? How do I show up at school, right, or kind of my team or my whatever I'm doing, my raising children, however it works for you? How do I do that? And here's what we said. We walked through a bit of a picture. I want to review some of it because it's going to be really helpful to our conversation today. What we said last week is this. We said the Bible says that people who are followers of Jesus are called ambassadors. We are ambassadors for Christ. We're ambassadors for Jesus, and we are ambassadors for the place we're from, which is the kingdom of heaven. That when I say yes to following Jesus, what happens is I become a part of Jesus' leadership, and I belong to the kingdom of heaven. In fact, I'm a citizen of that kingdom. And all the people that have ever said yes to Jesus, we together belong in that kingdom. And while we all live in physical countries, right, like the one we celebrate a little bit this week, like there's people from all over the globe that would claim the name of Jesus. And we'd say, well, we're grateful for our countries. We appreciate all of that for sure. We want to make sure to celebrate it. There's an even higher allegiance, and that is to the kingdom, right? And we said this, that when I am a follower of Jesus, I am an ambassador. And what that looks like is when I go into my everyday life over here, I bring with me the values and the vision and the heart and the love of the kingdom with me into that environment. So when I'm going to work, I'm not just showing up at work or showing up at school. I am bringing the heart and the mind of Jesus into work, into school. And that ambassadorship is a huge part of what can drive the way that I even approach my work, my relationships at school, the way that I work on the things that I'm kind of committed to in my life. And here's what we said, is that as I do that, kind of live with people, and they watch how I approach my life, how I make decisions, what's going to happen is they're going to see the difference. That difference is going to make sense. I remember seeing the difference myself before I was a follower of Jesus, right? If you know me, know my story, you know that I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't come to know Jesus until I was just finished my freshman year of college. And before that, I remember recognizing in a few of the friends that I had who were followers of Christ that there's something different about that person. Those people they're kind of different. They're unique. They do things differently than I would do them. And that reality, what it does, no matter what, is it's going to fire up some questions in the hearts and the minds of the people that are watching me live out that ambassadorship, right? So if I'm a follower of Jesus and I'm going to work or going to school or living in a neighborhood with people that maybe aren't followers of Christ, that may be you today, right? Then I might say, hey, as I live this way, I want to expect there to be questions that fire up. I'm not going to be surprised by that. And when they show up, I want to recognize those questions for kind of what they are, that they are truly opportunities. And here's kind of what they sound like. They might sound like this. Hey, man, like you were able to go through something really hard, and I know it was hard for you, but somehow you have like a piece about you that doesn't make sense to me. Hey, how come you don't do things that other people do? Like you don't, it seems like your language is different, your decisions are different, you don't want to go like, you're not going to party with everybody, and sometimes that might even show up with mockery and opposition. Like people might not always be excited about that difference that shows up. In fact, it might even be a thing that everybody starts to notice and points at you because you're so different than us in a specific behavior. But no matter what, it's going to fire up questions. Why are you like that? And it may be an interested why are you like that. It may be an oppositional why are you like that. But no matter what, those questions are going to start to fire up. And people are going to begin to take notice of the difference. No matter what, if I'm an ambassador and I'm living in a place that with people that don't know Jesus, those questions are going to happen. And Peter is going to tell us, hey, you should know that that's coming. Here's what he says in 3:15 and 16. He says, hey, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord, right? So I want to live life with Jesus. I want to revere, and sometimes the Bible talks about fearing the Lord. It's the idea really of reverence, that I'm going to revere Christ, not just at church on Sunday, and not just when I'm reading my Bible or interacting with something overtly spiritual. I want to revere Jesus all day, every day, and recognize that I'm living life with him. Right? But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. He says, but do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. Peter here is even expecting a bit of an oppositional response. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's just genuine interest. Sometimes there's opposition, but I want to be ready for it either way. Right? I want to be ready for it either way. So if for followers of Christ, the question I want to ask, and we dealt with this largely last week, is, am I living in such a way that the questions are going to fire up? If my faith isn't showing at all, and I'm not talking about you wear a Jesus t-shirt or have a fish on your blah, blah, or always talking, right? I'm talking about the conduct that you have, the way that you make decisions, the way that you love, right? If you are coming into these situations, and I'm coming into these situations with Jesus on purpose, that's going to fire the questions. You don't have to do Christian stuff to have this. In fact, I would say it may be even counterproductive at some times. But when those happen, we know those questions are going to show up, and people are going to start to ask the question, why? This is kind of where we left off last week. And when those whys start to show up, we call those here at Grace, we've used this phrase a lot, no-brainer moments. No-brainer moments. When somebody looks at you and says, hey, man, how are you able to survive this really difficult thing that you're going through? You can look at them and say, I'm just really tough, right? I'm really awesome. You can give them that answer if you want. You can say it's not so bad, it wasn't so difficult, Or you can say, man, you know what? Man, my faith has actually really been helping me. This thing I went through is really hard, and my faith has really been helping me out. It seems like you guys have an amazing marriage. How are you doing the marriage thing? Well, if somebody asked me that, I would say, I didn't used to believe in marriage. It wasn't until my faith kicked in and I understood God's design for marriage that it really helped me embrace it and has really helped my marriage in major ways. You work differently. Why do you do that? Right? We're all going to party and get trashed. Why aren't you going to get trashed too? Why are you accepting the people? Why are you so kind to somebody in the office or on the team that nobody else is kind, right? And then they may ask questions in all kinds of different ways, but they're different versions of no-brainer moments. They're little windows of opportunity that we can walk into and in subtle but intentional ways point to Jesus, right? Pointing people to Christ and the reason why Christ is making an impact on our lives. Right? You're not going into a 5-hour lecture on all of the theological concepts that you know, right? And then laying it all out. You're just saying, hey, I'm still learning, but God is helping me a ton in this area of my life. This has always been, maybe this has been really hard for me, right? Anyway, so you're diving into it, and Peter's going to say, hey, be ready for this. Be ready for the no-brainer moments. Be ready for the questions of why. Be ready for it to show up in a pretty real way. And just make sure when you do it with gentleness and respect. When you go to give an answer, what you're doing is you're not going to get on your high horse and belittle. You're not going to be holier than thou. You're not going to say, well, I've come to realize how religious I am and my awesomeness, and now, unlike you and your dysfunction, right? You shouldn't sound anything like that. Nor should anyone ever, right? By the way, but right, that's the idea. Is that we're not gonna be belittling. We're not gonna be condescending, because we are the exact same. One of the things that I love the most is being somebody that my story is I literally have lived about half of my life here and about half of my life here, so I can relate very, 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 very deeply to both of these people. And let me just tell you, right, if you're here, what's awesome is this. There's an amazing opportunity on the table for you. And here's the thing I would say. I'm sorry from somebody on this side of the table today. I'm sorry for the ways that we represent this. Because there's a really good and a really high likelihood that you've interacted with a follower of Jesus that has sounded some version of what I just sounded like. Who has been hypocritical, has been holier than thou, has made it about some weird thing that has nothing to do with Jesus and love. And your interaction with them has been less than favorable. And the difference that you notice between you and them maybe is one that's not so attractive. Listen, if that has been the case for you, I'm sorry. That is not what's supposed to happen. Okay? And often, it takes a minute for us to understand what we're really supposed to look like and live like, and what the difference is really supposed to be. So the difference is not that we behave this certain way and other people don't. The difference isn't it's not a political one. The difference isn't the difference isn't I've arrived somewhere and you haven't arrived. The difference isn't that I have a secret knowledge that you don't have. The difference is that I happen to discover something that's available to all of us a little bit ahead of you. I was broken and in need and needed forgiveness, and I needed a Savior, and that I happened to find one. And by the way, this is available to you in the exact same way as it's available to me. Right? Billy Graham, I think it was the one who said, I'm just one beggar showing another beggar where to find bread. Simple. There's nothing special because I'm a follower of Jesus. I didn't do anything to earn it. I'm not a good person. But where should I should be a train wreck today of damage and destruction, right? And in some ways, I'm trying to not be still. And it's only the grace of God that I can point to that has made any difference in my life whatsoever. So our message is not, you should become like me, and I have all the, or that I figured this out and the message is there's someone who can save us. I found him, and I want you to find him too. That's it. That's the heart behind it. Gentleness, respect. And I would just challenge you, if you're a follower of Jesus today, if you think there's anything that happens here on planet Earth that you're not capable of doing, you have not understood the scriptures. You do not understand what you've been saved from. You just don't. Hear me. If you think that you're above doing anything that can happen here on planet Earth, I would just look at you and say this: I don't believe that. I believe I am capable of the worst and most grotesque evil, and that it's only the grace of God that has rescued me from that evil. And I would argue this: until you understand that about yourself, you've not really understood what's going on here. Does it make sense? Unless I understand how deeply I've been rescued and what I'm capable of, I'm not going to understand how alike we are. Okay. No-brainer moments are going to pop up when I bring the culture of the kingdom and the heart of the king into my everyday. And when they show up, I want to give answers that are full of gentleness and respect, even if I'm getting picked on for doing the right thing. Paul would give more to this, right? Here's the idea. I want to meet people in their questions. Here's what Paul would say is this: be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Right, so I want to meet people in the middle of their questions. I want to answer the questions that they're asking, not the questions that I want to answer. Right, so they're asking those questions. I want to meet them there. I want to act with wisdom in the answers. Right, I want to bring wisdom and meet people kind of where they are. We talked about this a lot with listening. Same idea when I begin to share my faith when these no-brainer moments show up. He talks about letting your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. Here's the idea. I want this interaction to be grace-filled. Undeserved favor is the idea of grace. So God has given me undeserved favor, and I want to speak in such a way that gives undeserved favor to others. I remember the people that I knew that knew Jesus when I didn't know him, when I was in this seat. I remember interacting with people here and feeling respected by them, feeling seen by them, and genuinely having them be curious about who I am as a person. I felt loved and cared for. And even as they were telling me about their faith, I felt that way. I didn't feel demeaned or belittled or judged. I didn't feel like they were being hypocrites in the way they were talking about Jesus, right? I felt like that conversation was loaded with grace. Now, I had interactions that were different than that, but I remember these ones. And I was marked and impacted by those ones. Paul says, right, be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. Somebody asked me, right, what does that salt thing mean? Last week we talked about light. Here's the idea of salt in short. Salt does really like three things, right, in the ancient world. It flavors. It's different. It adds flavor, seasoning to food. Right? So I want to be the different thing in the room. I just have to know that's part of what it is. That's one. The second one is this: there's a preservation. Often meats would be preserved in salt. I'm preserving the goodness that can happen in the world in my presence there. And if you ever notice that's actually how it happens, is the fact that somebody is here that knows Jesus helps preserve more goodness in general. I want to be that, right? I want to be the different thing in the room that preserves what good is happening, right? And the last one is loyalty. Salt, the idea of salt is being loyal. That I want to be loyal to my king, even in a place where there is maybe very little loyalty. Full of grace, seasoned with salt. I want to answer with wisdom. I want to meet people in their questions, and I want to answer the questions they're asking. That's the idea. Now, when that happens, there's some inevitability that's going to play out. When I start to answer, hey, why are you this way? Why don't you do what we do? And we answer, even if it's full of grace and seasoned with salt, there's some inevitability that we're probably going to get a range of responses. And the range of responses we might get might look something like this. On one end, there might be a great openness. Somebody might hear our answer and be intrigued. Man, tell me more about that. What's it like for you to do the faith thing? I remember thinking these thoughts as I was starting to get closer. Right? As I was starting to get closer, I started to wonder, there's some of these people found that I need to find because I'm out of answers here. There might be a great openness, and if there's a great openness, then what happens, I need to have the courage to keep walking people closer and closer to the message of the gospel, right? That what Jesus did for me can happen for them. Slowly but surely help them understand and open my mouth and tell them the good news that Jesus laid down his life for me, and he's done that for them as well. On the other side of this spectrum, right? On the other side of the spectrum is really the possibility and the probability that there's going to be opposition. Opposition. Let's see if we can spell it right. There we go. I'm not sure if that's right, but that's what it's going to say, right? Here's the idea. And this is kind of on a spectrum. And so sometimes there's going to be a situation where I'm living this way, questions are popping up, answers are given, and then the response is closer to this. It's more like mockery. You fool is kind of what the tone of what people might say. Why would you do that? Right? It's more that tone in that way. The more treating you a little bit like a freak than like something that I would want to have in my life. Guys, this happens to us all the time. Right? We're just sensitive about it with our faith. How many of you have ever experienced mockery because you told somebody else what you cared about? How many of you have ever been mocked for telling somebody else what you cared about? You told them go ahead and raise your hands. Yeah, you never have had this before? You never told them what football team that you like, and then somebody's like, you're an idiot. Who likes them? You told them what kind of music you like, and nobody listens to that music. Evidently, there's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Somebody likes that music, right? You've never done that? We've all done this. In general, this is how we live, right? In general, with people that we live everyday life with, they start to know the stuff we really care about. If you live life with me, you would discover, and some of you already know it, right? You know that I love my family like crazy. I love my kids like crazy. Right? And if you didn't like my kids, we'd probably have a problem, right? I'm like them, do it, right? And if you got to know me, right, you would know that I like whiteboards. And I like to write illegibly on them in front of people, right? It's just fun for me to do. I don't just do this here, I do this at home. This is like a real thing, right? This is not a show. This is how I am, right? If you know me, you know I like to chop wood and split wood and run chainsaws. You're like, that's weird. I know, I like it, whatever, right? If you know me, you know I like ultimate Frisbee. I love playing ultimate Frisbee, and in fact, I had to miss a week because my hamstring got tweaked a little bit. I'm really mad about it, right? I can't wait till next Saturday I can play again. Now, if you looked at me and said, Ryan, I hate ultimate Frisbee, I'm not going to look at you and say, hey, I hate you because you don't love my thing, right? I might. Right? I might. But it's just you might like this sport, and I like this one, and that's okay. You might not like the sports team I like. You might not like the thing that I'm into, and I might not like the thing. We live with that. That's okay. We're not just going to clam up because somebody might mock me for my opinions and my decisions or even my values. So we want our faith to be natural, and we want to walk into situations when somebody discovers our faith, or we're going to have a situation we're going to talk about our faith. we should expect that somebody along the way eventually probably is not going to be super thrilled with it. They're probably going to make fun of us. Really? Really? You don't sleep with anybody unless you're married? I remember hearing that for the first time, and I was like, wow. By the way, if you grew up outside of Jesus, that's a very jarring thing to hear. Right? I remember hearing that for the first time going, wow. People who don't follow Jesus, they're going to view that in a certain way. Your decision to give your life and orient your life around the person of Christ, that's going to be viewed. You're going to be mocked. You're going to be made fun of. You might even be left out of some things because you're not as fun, quote unquote, at a party. I don't want to pretend like that's never going to happen. That's going to happen. Jesus, in fact, would tell us that is going to happen to you. You're going to have that experience. In fact, he would say this, blessed are you when people persecute you and mock you for my name's sake. In fact, rejoice. Here's what he says, rejoice and jump for joy. Jump for joy, because great is your treasure in heaven. Not when, if, when, right, backwards, right? Not is this a possibility this could happen. This is going to happen to you if I follow Jesus. Just like if I do anything meaningful with my life, somebody's not going to like it. That's just part of how it is. When it happens, Jesus says, hey, guess what? This is actually going to end well for you in eternity. You're going to have treasure in heaven. Awesome. He goes on, and he's going to help us to understand that this is a normal situation. And so I don't have to, here's the thing, I don't have to freak out. I don't have to fight back. I don't have to attack somebody. And here's the hard part. I got to realize that what somebody is often responding to when they're on this side of the equation in their response is they're not really rejecting me as much as they're rejecting Christ in me. Okay? They're not really rejecting me as much as they're rejecting Christ in me. Before, as a follower of Jesus, I just didn't want anything to do with Jesus. I like the person well enough. I just didn't want anything to do with Jesus yet. When somebody is responding and reacting against Jesus, they're going to mock and they're going to push away. And the more that I know that, the more security I can respond with. Here's what Jesus did not say. He didn't say, hey, if somebody disagrees with you, make sure you argue with them until you get them argued into submission. He didn't say that. He didn't say, hey, don't walk away until you win that fight. He didn't say that, right? It's different. I love this quote. Our senior pastor, Jeff Bogue, introduced me to this question. Here's what he said. He said this, do you want to make a point or do you want to make a difference? When you're thinking about sharing your faith, do you want to make an argument? Are you trying to argue your way into making this point? See, this is how it is. Are you trying to win in relationship over time and make a difference in somebody's life? Two totally different approaches. Right? If I'm feeling defensive and I want to argue and I want you to accept my premise, I'm going to try and make a point. If I care about your soul and I see that I'm just like you and you're just like me, I just bumped into Jesus first, I really want to make a difference in your life, somebody's going to feel that difference, right? Experience that difference. Do I want to make a point or do I want to make a difference in somebody's life is a deep question that we have to ask. And so much of what Jesus prescribed about this situation, he had nothing to say about us winning, about us fighting and winning. So when I go into argument mode, or I get worried and defensive about how people are going to receive me, what I need to do is I need to realize that most of what people are looking for is not so much my content. They're not looking for the answer to my question when they ask their questions about whatever. I got so many questions about dinosaurs. It's incredible. What about the dinosaurs? I don't know why. That's a theme, right? That showed up a lot. Right, well, what about UFOs? What about the aliens? What about all the other people from other religions? You get all the questions. Right? Well, what people really care about is not so much your answer. They want to see how you react to the question. They want to see how you react to the question. Right? Here's what I say. I want to represent. Right? I want to represent with my response. I want the way that I respond to the question is so incredibly important. It's way more valuable that if I respond to somebody and they're attacking, if I respond in peace, or I'm calm, I'm collected. If somebody asks me a question I don't answer and I'm relaxed, hey man, I'm still learning about this thing. I can find you the answer. Let me look into it. Versus on my heels and getting defensive and let me show you why you're an idiot. That they're looking to see. Here's what they're looking to see: is there really a difference? Your answers don't matter that much. They want to know: did this thing really change you, or do you just seem like you're changed? Is this real? Here's what we're asking: did this work? Does this Jesus thing work? And when we lose our minds on somebody, they're like, see. Right? And there's not room to mess up and apologize. That happens too. But in general, that's what we're looking for. Do you really believe this? Is this really changing you? Is there really a difference in here? And Jesus would go so far as to say, man, if you get all the way over here in opposition and people are mocking you and they're making fun of you and they're leaving you out, they might even be treating you like an enemy. We would probably humanly think that's probably a line where I should start fighting back. And I'll be honest, as a human being, it's hard for me not to fight back, right? Like personally, if I'm being, it's hard to not engage that. I've been so deeply challenged by this verse. Jesus would say this, Matthew 5, but I tell you, love your enemies. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to shine or to rise on the evil and the good. And he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So he says, hey, when you're in the middle of this and you get opposition, what I want you to do is I want you to show people. It's more about showing people who I am than it is about saying more and more things. Not that I'm not going to use my words, right, in this situation, but this is the key. I want to show people Jesus in the midst of the opposition. I want to bring people to Jesus in openness. And, of course, there's going to be everything in between. But the ultimate question, right, of loving our neighbors and if I'm going to love people, and I'm going to do it because I've been loved, and I'm going to do it differently, and I might initiate, I'm going to listen, I'm going to meet needs, that difference is going to show up in a real way. And here's the thing. It's going to show up in opportunities. Here's what I would say. It's going to show up in opportunities to do both this and this. And here's the thing. Don't discount the power of either of these. Don't discount the power of either of these. If I'm going to show people Jesus in the middle of an opposition, you don't know where that's going to go. And you don't know the difference that might make in somebody over time. In fact, there is story after story after story in the church of when persecution hits, how powerfully openness follows that. You don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Right? So I have an opportunity here to introduce people to the love of Jesus in my everyday normal life. And here's the thing. I want the boldness and the courage to bring it up. And then I want to trust that Jesus is going to help me to represent him in the midst of a range of different responses. Right? And all of this, we want to come back to our why. We love because he first loved us. Why would I be willing to put myself in uncomfortable situations? Because he put himself in an uncomfortable situation for me. Why would I be willing to bring hope where hope is hard to find? Because he brought hope to where hope was hard to find. Why will I show up and endure some of this Because love is always going to push me into this kind of difficulty and opportunity. Jesus did that in my life, and now I want to do that in the lives of the people around me. Guys, right? And here's the thing. This is never going to be perfect, right? It's kind of simple on the whiteboard, but in real life, it's messy. When I say yes to being an ambassador and recognize that that's who I am as a follower of Jesus, all of a sudden, opportunities open up and you give that time and you don't know where that can go. Powerfully, Jesus can use your life to move the gospel forward. Now, some of us are here in the room and you're not a follower of Jesus. Right? And we've talked about this a bit. You're like me, right? When I was in college, and you're investigating this whole thing, and you may even be wondering, is this thing the real deal? And listen, if you have examples around you and you can see it and you can see the difference, already your eyes are open to this reality. Let me just tell you, this love is a real love. You might have been failed in 1,000 different ways, but this thing is real. And Jesus can change you. He can forgive you. It doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done. He is inviting you in to this. And I'm sorry for when we don't express how much we want you to be in too. Because we do. Say, how do I get in, Ryan? All you have to do is this. You go directly to the King, right? In prayer, Jesus, I need you to forgive me. I failed you. I feel shame. Would you take it away? I want in. I want to say yes. I want to be a part of this. And then you'll be in the family of God. You'll be in on all that heaven and power and transformation that comes with knowing Jesus. It's all available to you. If you never said yes to that, man, that's where all the good stuff is. Religion, churchianity, it's not the thing. This is the thing. This is what we've been meaning to say for a long time. This is what we're doing. If you want that, it's available. Right? For all of us, can we love our neighbors as he has loved us? The band's going to come up. I'd love for you to wrestle through these questions just like I am as we sing and we worship together. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you so much that even when we oppose you, and even when we have been your enemies, that your word says that's when you laid down your life for us, Christ. Father, that's when you sent the Son in the midst of our opposition, in the midst of our raised fist against you. You died for us. So, Lord, we want to lay down our lives for the people around us. And when they're interested and when they're curious and when they're asking or when they're mocking and they want to know the reason for the hope, God, would you give us courage to say it, to point to you, to be associated with you. Lord, because we know that you are willing to be associated with us. God, I pray again that you would use the people in this room in powerful ways over time to bring hope and love and transformation to many that you bring across our path. Work on our hearts, Lord, even now.